I was sitting on a grassy knoll in Fort Benning, Georgia, and a drill sergeant said, "The troops come first."
Welcome to Agency for Change, a podcast from KidGlov that brings you the stories of change makers who are actively working to improve our communities. In every episode, we'll meet with people who are making a lasting impact in the places we call home.
You might be someone who believes in buying local. That's a very popular concept these days. The idea of shopping at small businesses in your community in order to help spur economic growth when they, in turn, pay their employees from your community or buy supplies from other local merchants. But do you bank locally as well? Local banks, particularly those in small towns all over America, are vital to the health of these communities, offering credit that helps people start small businesses, run their farms, and buy homes. Today, you're going to hear about a bank in Trainer, Iowa, which has built its reputation around giving back with things like financial literacy classes and community reinvestment. And we're going to chat with the couple that made that bank what it is today, discover why giving back is so important to them, and learn about their love for their community and how you can just find out more about them. Hey everyone, this is Lynn Weinman, President and Chief Strategist of KidGlov. Welcome to another episode of the Agency for Change podcast. Today's guests are Mick and Judy Guttau, founders of TS Bank, which helps ignite lasting client and community prosperity. Mick and Judy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you because I have talked with other people from the bank who have told me part of your story. So I'm looking forward to diving into that today. And Judy, let's start with you. For someone who's never heard of TS Bank, can you explain what you do and how you help people?
Well, we are a bank and we are a family-owned community bank. And I emphasize that because we definitely focus on our community. And our theme, our motto is that we want to ignite prosperity. And we also really want to help our community grow and just be better. And when we say our community, we're talking about all the communities in our area.
Judy, I'm so glad you said that because it seems to me these days that everybody's trying to be a bank. A lot of big corporations are trying to be banks. Insurance companies are trying to be banks. And I think the community bank plays such an important role all throughout America that I'm glad that you shared that. And Mick, I'd love to hear about your beginnings. Can you walk me through the journey? I understand you were in Vietnam, you were a soldier, and then you had the opportunity to purchase the bank with Judy. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, I was with the Air Cavalry as a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and came home. My degree is in agriculture, and my long-range plans had always been to go back to the farm. However, we were sitting in our apartment down in Fort Riley, Kansas, my last year of active duty after I'd been home from Vietnam. My brother calls and says, "Mick, you got to call Bob at the bank," who I'd known since I was a little boy. He was the president of the bank. And he said, "They're looking for a loan officer." I said, "Why should I call him?" He said, "Well, you want to get back home and be connected to agriculture. You maybe hear about land for rent, et cetera." So anyway, I called Bob up and he offered me the job without even an interview. Of course, he'd known me for a long time. And so anyway, I came to the bank in 1972, right out of the Army. My first problem was being confined because I'm a farm kid. I'm an infantry officer. I'm an air cavalry pilot. And, I just like to be outside. I don't like to be confined. And I don't know that I've ever been confined 8 hours or 9 hours a day. I came to work here, and then I decided to leave because a company in Omaha offered me a job to expand their business into Iowa. And I'd be working with farmers, and I still get to live in my hometown. They were going to give me a car, and the salary they offered me was double what I was receiving.
Whoa.
And as you can probably detect, Bob, the owner of the bank, his family, and I are good friends to this day. But I'm telling him that I've been interviewed, and this is the offer they got, and I'm going to leave. And we both got tears in our eyes when I told him this. And I finally said to him, I said, well, Bob, you know I'm not happy. What would you do if you were me? And I should preface this by saying that we were living in a house trailer at the time. We probably had a net worth of $20,000, depending on the price of hogs that my brother and I were raising together. And anyway, I said, Bob, what would you do if you were me? And he said, well, Mick, why don't you just buy the bank? And I said, Bob, you got change for a $5? And he said, no, seriously. He said, I think if you talk to your family and I talk to my family, maybe we can work something out. So Bob is only, we figure 13 years older than I am. Mm-hmm. And I was 31 at the time. In fact, we just had lunch with he and his wife a year ago when I went to one of my Vietnam reunions. They live in North Carolina now. And so we're still connected with them. But anyway, he talked to his family, and I'd come home and I talked to Judy about it and tell her what's going on. And we prayed about it and we talked about it. And then we went up to my parents, and we all live on the same farm. We went up to my mom and dad's house and asked them, you know, what they thought. My father already had it figured out. He said, I thought something like that was going to happen. And I said, you talked to Bob? And he said, no. Anyway, he had already talked to Mom, and they decided I could have anything out of the farm I could get, like on a loan, as long as it was okay with my siblings. So got approval from Mom and Dad, went to my brother and sister-in-law, my sister and brother-in-law, and I'm the youngest child. They're 10 years and 4 years older than me, and for some reason, they let me risk the whole farm that at that time had been in the family for about 100 years. Now it's approaching 150 years. And I was able to borrow $250,000 on the farm. And then the Grunstall family financed the other $750,000. And at the age of 31, I became a bank president.
Wow. What a Cinderella story, really. I mean, that doesn't happen to very many 31-year-olds that first of all, they have the opportunity to buy a bank. And second of all, their family rallies together in that way to make that possible. That's what I love about small towns. Small towns make things happen like that too. And I'm curious, Judy, on your part, you know, did you ever envision yourself going into the banking business with your husband at the young age of 31?
Not at all. I was a home ec major in graduating from Iowa State University.
Yeah.
And we had 2 children, as Mick indicated. We're living in the mobile home. And he called up once he started and he said, do you think you could come help? And well, you know what? Mick and I had been working for the Farm Business Association together. Part-time. And we found that we worked well together. Lots of people will say, well, who makes the final decisions? Or how do couples do that? And I always say, well, I always have the last word, and it's yes, sir.
I love that.
But we found that we worked well together, and that he's a visionary and I'm more of an implementer of small details. And so our youngest son, who is now our CEO and president, was only 3 at the time. And I started working on a part-time basis and continued working part-time in a lot of different roles, just working with Mick and then with our bank team.
I love that story.
Yeah, a couple extensions on that story is that she mentioned we were both working part-time for the Farm Business Association. So I was working about a third time for them, full-time at the bank, flying for the National Guard of Nebraska as instructor, pilot, unit commander, and I was going to graduate school, raising hogs with my brother. Other than that, didn't have much to do. And,
yeah, right. All of those. That sounds like 3 full-time jobs, Mick.
It was and all of that was just those are all great experiences. But working for the Farm Business Association, and I was working with some very successful farmers that range from people, maybe farming 240 acres with some cattle and hogs to one guy that was already in those days selling millions of dollars of cattle in 1 year. And so it was just a very broad range of exposure. And I share with people that there's no question in my mind that it was my experience and my members in the Farm Business Association that educated me and helped us get through the egg crisis as a banker. I learned so much from them that they helped me through the egg crisis, and it worked out very well.
Ah, good for you. I think that's fantastic. We talk a lot today about having empathy in business and really understanding your client base, and you had to have had that advantage of having worked so hard and having that background to come together. I also really admire that you work together so well, because a lot of couples don't really do that. And I think it sounds like you recognize you have differences that come together to make you a really great team. So, Mick, you mentioned the ag crisis, and you have been through several different crises in your time since you've owned the bank. Why was keeping the bank alive such an important part of the community's survival in Trainer and the other communities you serve?
Well, during the original farm crisis, we only had the one location in Trainer, and it's just like any other business or the school or the churches or anything else. The bank is an integral part of the community, and we just needed to keep it going. And I got a lot of encouragement from people in the community. I got a lot of cooperation. We did have one bankruptcy, but I did what we called in-house bankruptcies. And I would have asked the whole family to come in, and we'd sit around the boardroom table, and I would present to them what the situation looked like, and that we would need to charge this loan off down to this amount, much as what we would lose if they file bankruptcy. But I wanted to try and keep every family on their farm. I did not want to lose anybody that would be leaving the community. And so I faced it that way. We brought everybody in, we worked that out, but I would tell them, I'm not going to be comfortable unless you go talk to an attorney. And I should back up a little bit. One of the things I would share with them is that this formula that I'm sharing with you is going to be the exact same formula as a bankruptcy, except that you and I are each going to pay $10,000 for legal fees. This was back in the 70s. It's a lot more than that now.
Yeah.
Going to pay those legal fees, and that's $20,000 that's disappearing from this formula. But I said, I think it's important you go talk to your attorney and bounce this off of them. Every one of them except one came back and accepted the offer. And so we did the in-house bankruptcy and continued to work with those people. The young man that did not accept my offer walked out of my office 2 years later.
Walked into your office?
Walked into my office 2 years. And I thanked him for that. And I said, we got to be in this community together. Let's keep moving forward. And we're great friends to this day.
Mick and Judy, I know bankruptcy is not an easy or fun thing to talk about, but that story just gave me goosebumps. I feel your passion for caring for the community. That's why I love community bankers, because I think that is a really important aspect that you don't get from a giant bank that maybe is making decisions in another state in another way. And maybe I revealed part of your answer to this next question I want to ask you, but what do you wish people knew about community banks like yours? And Judy, let's start with you and then go to Mick.
Well, I guess I would just say that we want them to know that our community bank truly wants to be a part of the community in so many ways. And we want to give back. And so, and that ties back, I'm not sure Mick mentioned this, but when he came home from Vietnam, you know what it was like.
Yeah.
It was a tough time, but coming back to Trainer, people supported him and came up to us in church and greeted us. And so that's very important to us. So it just became a part of helping our families and just helping people in this community. It's really great. And I think that probably happened in a lot of rural places in America, but that was not true when he came into the airport in Los Angeles. And
I was yelled at, and of course I was in uniform. That's how we traveled in those days.
Absolutely.
I was yelled at and spit at. And the same way when I was going to Vietnam, the airport in San Francisco, the same thing happened. Came home to my hometown and just greeted with open arms and a show of love. And that's the way I knew my community. So I wasn't really surprised by that. And a few years later, or maybe even decades later, I realized, wow, this was special. This is something different. It's a a feeling we try and incorporate. You talk about, doing things in other states. We now have banks in Wisconsin and Illinois and North Dakota. We have offices for our wealth management in Denver and San Francisco and Omaha. And so we are located in many areas, but we try and drive the premise that the community is what's important, what we're trying to serve. And we need to keep that in mind every time. In fact, when I first bought the bank and my first examination, the examiners come in, and of course, Judy probably thinks more like an examiner. She's a detail person. She's on the DISC test, she's a high C. On the DISC test, I'm a high D.
Yeah.
And so we just think different, And so when the examiners heard me say that my goal is to not tell anybody no on a loan request, they just got this surprised look on their face, and I couldn't believe what I said. And I said, well, it doesn't mean I'm going to take the loan. It means I'm going to help them figure out what needs to be done to see if they can get a loan, either through us restructuring or going to the SBA or whatever it might be. But I said, that's how I feel we should be as a community bank, and serve our customers and find an approach for that customer.
Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Because when our son was probably 10, 11, 12, junior high, he was the lawnmower for the bank, and we never pushed our kids into going into banking. We just really felt they needed to pursue their own desires. And he really wanted he thought he was going to be a vet as he grew up. But one time, Mick, you could tell that story really well about how you said to him, well, have you ever thought about being a banker?
Well, when talking about his future, one of his comments was, he said, well, I know I don't want to go into marketing.
You're into banking.
No, first he said marketing.
Marketing. Marketing is not a bad career.
I said, Josh, life is marketing. And this was a story at an older age. He was dating his wife to be. And I said, Josh, life is marketing. And he looked at me and I said, how do you think you got Shelley to date you? I said, sales job, that's called marketing. And I said, everything in life is marketing.
That's true.
But the story I was thinking about was when Mick had said to him, have you ever considered being a banker? And he said, no, I want to do something that helps people. And that was actually before he was going to be a veterinarian. He thought he would be a physical therapist. And Mick, that just impacted his heart. So they had a heart-to-heart talk about what banking is all about.
Yeah, we had a good discussion that night. So.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to take this back and say, Mick and Judy, both of you, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you did in Vietnam. Thank you for the sacrifices your family made, because that's important to all of us. And I hear the emotion and passion in your voice. And I think that's the thing that by having this podcast and helping tell your story, is want people to understand what community bankers do. Because I think every community in America needs a bank, a church, and if they're an agricultural community, they need a co-op. And those three things kind of form that background or backbone in my mind. So I know that giving back is really ingrained into your culture. And Judy, I'm wondering, can you talk to me about some programs or some ways you've been able to help the community? Because I know you've been really innovative in that area.
Well, that's kind of you, Lynn. I always want to give credit to Mick because, again, he's the visionary, and many times the ideas were his. I maybe developed one or two, but many of the ideas were his. And when we first started banking, I don't think any banks at that time were having newsletters, not in our area. And he thought we needed to do that. And so we got a newsletter started and of course that's evolved into more of email blasts at this time too. But we started a Statesman's Club, which was a club for people 55 and over to have educational and social opportunities. We would do about 16 or 17 opportunities, but it was also just a great way to draw in new people in the area and get to know them in a more personal way. And they, us, and that was just a great time. One of the very first things we did was reinstitute the watermelon feed,
Yeah.
at the county fair. And after that, there were just a lot of things that went on with developing who we were going to support as nonprofits, and some faith-based giving as well as heartfelt giving. And so we just developed our plan of community reinvestment, and then that expanded into financial literacy in our TS Institute, which is an opportunity to go into the schools. And that actually was our son's idea during the crisis in 2008. He felt people weren't understanding finances. And so we started a program which continues to this day. And I've got some figures here. I should look them up and report to you. But we're impacting thousands of students.
Actually, tens of thousands. Yeah.
That's
tens
amazing.
of thousands of students with this. And in our local community and in some of the other communities too, the school board actually implemented a one semester class on finances and learning personal finances. And that started right here in Trainer and has expanded.
I know that program has grown really big too. So that's really great. Mm-hmm. You also do a program that's kind of like Shark Tank. Is that right?
Yes, we do. And that idea was actually developed by Kelsey.
We've talked to Kelsey on this podcast.
Yes, you have. And we call it REV. We call it REV, and it's an opportunity for people to promote their entrepreneurial ideas and participate in a contest with judges. And some end up receiving awards. And that's been really fun. It's a fun thing to do in a community. And we've been trying to implement that in our various charter locations.
That's
fantastic. A local business won one of our recent awards and is located here in our community and
right across the street.
Right across the street, and actually hosting a food truck today to draw people in. So
I love that. You just continue to embrace the community and give back. I'm curious, is there a particular story or memory of a way you impacted someone through your giving that stands out to you? And Mick, let's start with you, and then Judy, you can jump in.
Oh, she's going to have to help me.
Well, I love the story. Mother that came up to you
oh yes, just a few years ago we were at a high school event up at the high school music, and it was over with, and I'm standing out in the hallway because I'm just standing there leaning against the wall, and she's talking to someone else, and this young mother comes up to me and she's pointing her finger. I mean, she gets really close to me, almost like she's punching me in the chest.
That sounds scary, Mick.
Yeah, I thought, oh no, did we send back an overdraft check or something? You know what happened? And she said, aren't you Mick Guttau? And I said, yes, I am. She said, well, I want you to know, and I can't remember the exact numbers now, but for every $1 our son gets, he puts 25 cents away for savings and 25 cents away for giving. And then she shook her finger again at me and she said, and if it wasn't for you, he wouldn't be doing that.
Aww.
And I thanked her for that. And she turned around and walked away. And I thought, why didn't I get her name and phone number? We could make a TV.
That would be a great TV commercial. Well, if she's listening, please send us a message to KidGlov and we'll get that to Mick and Judy. How about that? So
we've had numerous feedback from parents and other family members about what kids have learned and how maybe it's just kind of changed their lives. Maybe even, money management, they look at it now as kind of a hobby or a game, to see how the world really works.
It is just such a great thing to learn that may not be part of the normal school curriculum. Teachers may not be educated on how to teach it. And if you understand how to manage your money, it does change the trajectory of your life. So think of all the students that you are impacting in that way. I think that's great, Mick and Judy. So I understand the bank is celebrating a big birthday this coming year. Could you tell us about that milestone and what it means to you and maybe some of the things you're going to do to celebrate?
Well, it's going to be 100 years in 23. May of 23 is 100 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As far as activities, we're really not involved in in determining what's going to be planned. The marketing committee is truly working on that, but they will feed us information and get our input. I know that one thing that a few years ago, a relative who was the son of one of our vice president long ago was very gifted in writing, and he wrote a book about the history of the bank. And we need, he's passed away, and we need to clean it up a little bit and get it all firmed up. And so that's something I'll be working on in the next few months too, to just make sure we have that story all complete.
That will be great.
And I like to point out that of those 100 years, I've been here 51 of those years.
That's nice.
But that's nothing, because when I came, the person who was the vice president of the bank was my uncle and my godfather. And he continued to work at this bank until he was 77. He'd been here 77 years.
Wow. That's a long tenure.
Yeah, he was, when he graduated from trainer, he was going to go to Iowa State, go to college. And then he ended up, the banker called his parents and asked if he could talk to him about working at the bank. And he started that summer. And he worked here for 77 years. So I really, even with 51 years now, I have nothing to brag about. So.
You've got a ways to go. So this next question is for either one of you. What do you think the next 100 years holds for the bank?
Thank you. I think that the team that we have at this point there is so much talent involved and so much professionalism in so many areas that I just foresee the bank continuing to move forward with additional acquisitions and growth and expansion. And I'm quite confident the focus will be on supporting the community and getting back to.
Oh, that's fantastic. You have had so much success, Mick and Judy, and done so many interesting things. I'm curious to know, if you think back on the time since you bought the bank, is there anything you'd change or do differently if you could?
Oh, that's an interesting question. The opportunities that were given to us were so fantastic, and God presented these things before us and set it up. And I tell people, I frequently don't agree with the things that he does in my life, but usually after about 10 or 15 years, I agree, okay, you were right. Yeah, that's all right. So, and I think that's been true in what we've done. And but just the continuation of moving forward and serving communities, I think will continue to bring success to the bank too, and not only the communities.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that answer. I'm next going to ask you my favorite question, and people who listen to the podcast know that I am inspired by motivational quotes, and I feel so lucky to get to talk with people like the two of you on the podcast. I'm curious if you could each give us an original Judy Guttau and Mick Guttau quote for our listeners.
I'll go first. I'm going to cheat a little bit. Mine is not original, but it's very old.
All right.
I've actually done presentations on this. I was sitting on a grassy knoll in Fort Benning, Georgia, and a drill sergeant said, "The troops come first." And I listened to what he said, and he said, what that means to you as officers is, when you camp down for the night, you got to make sure everybody's tucked into their pup tents, but you're probably going to be sleeping in a GP medium tent on a cot where they're sleeping on the ground. When people are going through the mess line, you got to make sure everybody gets to the mess line and gets their food first. And before you go through, you will probably get more food because there's going to be some left over, and they see your rank and they pile on a little bit more. But as always, the troops came first. And I sat there that day, and it sounded so profound to me. And a lot of drill sergeants are not very well educated people. They're just very experienced people, and from combat and leading people. And I listened to a lot of what they said, but that was the quote that stayed in my mind. And when we built the addition onto this building, I went down the employee lounge, and I look out through the glass wall of the employee lounge at the far wall on the other side of the hallway. And in 1 foot tall letters, it says, in quotes, "The troops come first." And then it says, "Captain Mick Guttau, Army." And his voice said, I didn't realize I preached that so much. But it's just, so the troops here are the people who are working on the front lines, being tellers or sitting at a computer, doing internet banking and that type of thing, maybe 1 or 2 states away. But still, they come first because they're the face of the bank with that client. And I'm not so sure that it didn't even save my life. Frequently, when you're in the middle of combat, you have to change your mind about what you briefed the guys on about how we were going to do this. And sometimes in the middle of a mission, I would change things up. And whenever I did that and we got back on, I would always get to the guys and tell them why I made that decision so they could understand how I thought. Because my life depended on my wingman, because he's going to put down suppressive cover when I break off the target. So I knew that he had to understand how I think. And so I've kind of brought that to my work and to this bank. And like I said, I didn't know I had preached it so much it was going to appear on a wall somewhere. It's been a valuable lesson in life and family, in anything you're involved in, whether it's your church, your community, school, whatever it is.
Mick, I think you should write a book. I think that's the title of your book. When you find yourself with a little time.
I have a very thick file, but I don't know if it'll ever be in a book or not.
I think it should be. I'd be in line to buy that book. So, Judy, how about you?
Well, I also have some borrowed sayings when I've been training people or working with people who help me. And if they've made a mistake, and they usually feel so much worse about it than I do. And so I will say to them something that Mick is always saying when we're in a difficult situation, that he will say, well, they're not shooting at me, referring to Vietnam. So it's not all that important to have made a mistake, and you can always correct it. And then the other one is, my mom would always say, well, no one's going to know the difference in 100 years. And so I will share that too. Sometimes with people who feel badly about a mistake.
I love that.
Part of that for both of us is that, she's secretary of the board and I'm chairman of the board. And I've been here a long time. We've both been here a long time. And, when people, especially young people and new employees, walk in and they know who we are, and they think about the title and stuff like that. And so we both try and put them at ease, and I joke a lot with people, and Judy just has a very pleasant personality. So I think they get comfortable, and people are, whether it's in a bank or on the teller line or whatever it is, fixing a computer or in combat, if that person isn't put first, you're not going to have a successful outcome. If the IT guy is here in my office trying to help me fix my computer, if I don't let him sit down on my computer, I'm not letting him be first, and he's not going to get it fixed. So.
Mick and Judy, I feel it. I feel it talking with you today. I feel like I could talk with you for the rest of the morning, but I know podcasts have a time limit, so we probably have to keep this moving on. I'm curious, for our listeners who would like to learn more about your work, what's going on at the bank, maybe as you start to promote some of the 100th year celebration, how can they find out more?
Well, there's various ways. They can go to our website, tsbank.com, and they can call. They can go on our various social media, and we're on all of the social medias, so we can be accessed in that way.
That's great. We'll make sure to have a link to tsbank.com in our show notes too, for people to make it easy to access. So as we wrap up our time together today, I'd love to hear from each of you. What would you say is the most important thing you would like our listeners to remember about the work that you're doing?
I would have to say, and it kind of gets back to the troops come first quote, but that is, you can say that many ways. The troops come first, the family comes first, the employees come first, the community comes first, and just on and on through life. We're involved in so many different connections that we just need to make sure that we're being supportive in all those roles, whether it's our children, our parents, or whatever it might be.
That's fantastic.
And I would just say that we care. We care, and we'll just try to do the best we can.
Mick and Judy, I feel that, and I fully believe the world needs more people like you, more organizations like TS Bank, and I just really thank you for taking time to tell your story to us today.
Thank you, Lynn. You're a sweetheart.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's Agency for Change podcast. To hear all our interviews with those who are making a positive change in our communities, or to nominate a changemaker you'd love to hear from, visit KidGlov.com at KIDGLOV.com to get in touch. As always, if you like what you've heard today, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.